Captain Ashley Morrison stood in her ship's observation deck, watching the gleaming spires of Nova Station rotate slowly against the backdrop of endless stars. Her calloused fingers traced the dedication plaque mounted on the wall. Morrison Interstellar Shipping, building bridges across the stars since 2157. 3 generations of her family had built this company from a single refurbished cargo hauler into a fleet of 200 ships. Now, with a single council vote, it was all about to change. The holoscreen flickered with the live feed from the Galactic Council chambers. Councillor Xerx Theta, his iridescent scales reflecting the chamber's soft light, stood at the podium with what passed for a smile among his species. "The Sentient Safety Act passes with an overwhelming majority," he announced, his translator struggling to contain his satisfaction. "From this day forward, all Deathworlder-operated businesses must cease operations within designated fragile species zones." Ashley's jaw clenched. "Computer, display the new restricted zones." The star map materialized around her, and her heart sank. Red zones covered nearly every major trading hub in Council space. Arcturus, Centauri, the Pleiades Exchange, even Nova Station itself pulsed an angry crimson. "They're not even trying to hide it anymore," she muttered, bringing up her company's safety records. 200 years of operation. 0 fatalities. 0 major accidents. Not even a single complaint about dangerous Deathworlder behavior. None of it mattered now. Her comlink chimed, Captain Morrison. Her operations chief, James Rodriguez, appeared as a hologram. His usually cheerful face was drawn with concern. "The Nova Station Port Authority just canceled all our docking permits. They're saying we have 48 hours to clear out. All of them." Ashley fought to keep her voice steady. "Even the emergency medical supply runs." "Everything." James ran a hand through his gray hair. "They're saying our high-gravity adaptations make us an unacceptable risk to station integrity. Captain, we have 16 ships in dock right now. 3 of them are loaded with time-sensitive medical supplies for the Rigel colonies." Ashley's fingers curled into fists. The Rigel colonies were suffering from a devastating plague. Those supplies could save millions of lives. What about the automated cargo drones they're always bragging about? Can't handle the radiation in the Rigel sector. James laughed bitterly. Funny how they forget that humans are the only ones who can safely pilot through those conditions. A second alert flashed across her screen. Her ship's AI had finished decrypting the transmission packets she'd intercepted during the council session. As she read through them, her blood began to boil. The messages were clear. The Exerxian Trade Federation had orchestrated everything. The safety concerns, the restricted zones, all of it was fabricated to eliminate competition from Deathworlder companies. They'd even calculated exactly how many lives would be lost due to delayed medical shipments, dismissing it as acceptable casualties in the pursuit of economic stability. Ashley's gaze drifted to the family photos on her wall. Her grandfather standing proud beside his first ship. Her mother shaking hands with alien dignitaries, building the partnerships that had made their company a symbol of interspecies cooperation. All their work, all their dreams of showing the galaxy that humans could be more than just the scary creatures from a high-gravity death world. "Captain." James was still waiting. "What are we going to do?" Ashley Morrison straightened her uniform, a cold smile crossing her face. "Tell the crews to start recording everything. Every canceled contract, every rejected permit, every single example of how they need us, but won't admit it. And get me in touch with our friends in the Kravox Mining Union and the Lithoid Engineering Corps. Mom, it's time to show the galaxy exactly what happens when you push Deathworlders too far." She turned to face the massive station, her reflection hard in the reinforced glass. "They want to pretend they don't need us. Fine. Let's see how their perfect civilization runs without the species they're so afraid of." The die was cast. Somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of the Galactic Council, an alert was probably already flagging her unusual communications. Let them watch. Let them worry. The Deathworlders had tried playing nice. Now it was time for Plan B. The Europan Outpost's observation dome offered a spectacular view of Jupiter's swirling storms, but Ashley Morrison wasn't here for sightseeing. She stood before the reinforced windows, watching the massive form of Krexval, the Kravok's mining chief, duck through the radiation-shielded doorway. His ursine bulk cast a shadow across the deck plates, crystalline fur refracting the lightning that perpetually crackled through Europa's atmosphere. "They hit your routes too." Krexval's deep voice rumbled through the chamber, translator struggling with his native subharmonics. Behind him, a lithoid engineer named Silicon 7 clinked across the floor, her crystalline body absorbing the ambient radiation like a living battery. "Every major hub," Ashley confirmed, bringing up a holographic display of the galaxy. "The Exertians planned this for years. They're calling it safety regulation, but it's economic warfare." The third member of their clandestine meeting emerged from a maintenance hatch. Murg Splash, her amphibian form glistening with the specialized moisture that let her species survive hard vacuum, pulled herself onto a support strut. "The space dock workers are ready. We've lost 90% of our contracts since the new laws." Silicon 7's crystalline fingers danced through the holographic display, leaving trails of light in their wake. "Fascinating. They believe they can replace us with automation. Yet their most advanced systems cannot match our natural adaptations." Ashley nodded, zooming in on the Rigel sector. 3 million people will die without those medical supplies. The Exertians know their drones can't handle the radiation, but they don't care. They're calling it acceptable losses in their internal memos. Krexval's massive paw slammed into a nearby table, leaving deep indents in the reinforced metal. "No deaths are acceptable. My people mine heavy elements in conditions that would crush their fragile shells. Without us, their precious ships would have no fuel." "Exactly." Ashley brought up another display, this one showing critical infrastructure across Council space. "They've built their entire civilization on our backs. Heavy industry, radiation work, deep space construction. It's all done by species they call dangerous and primitive." Silicon 7's crystalline form pulsed with internal light. "The Council fears what they cannot control. They see our natural abilities as weapons, never as tools for progress. Then let's show them what progress really looks like." Ashley activated a quantum-encrypted channel, hidden in the background radiation that perpetually bathed the Jovian system. "I've been building a network. Deathworlder companies, workers, engineers, everyone they've pushed out of civilized space." Murg Splash's multifaceted eyes gleamed. "A strike? No violence. Just stopping. Better." Ashley's smile was cold. "A demonstration. They want a galaxy without Deathworlders. Let's give them a taste. Starting with the systems they think they can run without us." The holographic display filled with points of light, thousands of Deathworlder-operated businesses, and work crews across Council space. Silicon 7's analysis scrolled beside each point, showing critical dependencies the Council had overlooked. "The Exertians celebrate their victory," Krexval growled, studying the data. "They think they have contained us. They forget that their ancestors once feared fire too." "We're not starting a war," Ashley emphasized, looking each of her fellow Deathworlders in the eye. "We're just going to step back and let them experience life without us. Every safety system we maintain, every dangerous job we handle, every crisis we prevent, all of it stops. Until they learn," Silicon 7 chimed, her crystalline form resonating with purpose. "Or until they break," Murg Splash added, her usual cheerful demeanor hardened by months of discrimination. Outside the dome, Jupiter's storms raged on, a fitting backdrop to their plans. The quantum channels hummed with encrypted messages, spreading from system to system. In the darkness of space, on radiation-swept moons, and in crushing gravity wells, The Deathworlders prepared to show the galaxy exactly why evolution had made them so hard to kill. The Council had wanted safety. They were about to learn that true safety came from cooperation, not control. And the lesson was going to hurt. Nova Station's central trade hub buzzed with its usual activity when the first incident occurred. A shipment of Centaurian silk, worth millions of credits, became mysteriously too heavy for the automated loading systems to handle. The Exerxian dockmaster watched in horror as his precious cargo sat immobile, his sophisticated machinery whirring helplessly. "What do you mean it's too heavy?" High Counselor Vex demanded, his scales shifting from iridescent blue to angry crimson. "It's the same weight as always." The dockmaster's appendages twisted nervously. "The systems say it's within normal parameters, but nothing will lift it. We've lost 3 loading mechs trying." Behind them, Ashley Morrison leaned against a viewport, seemingly absorbed in her datavat. She didn't need to look up to know that the Kravox workers who usually handled such loads were conspicuously absent, their natural high-gravity strength nowhere to be found. The second malfunction hit 6 hours later. The Environmental Control Center reported sudden fluctuations in atmospheric pressure and gravity levels. Nothing dangerous, just enough to make the more fragile species uncomfortable. The lithoid engineers who normally maintained the systems were, of course, still processing their work permit renewals. "This is outrageous." Counselor Vex's voice echoed through the administrative levels. "Send in the maintenance drones." "We did, sir," a nervous technician reported. "They keep shorting out, something about the radiation levels being unusual." Ashley smiled behind her datavat. Silicon 7's people had spent millennia evolving to work in conditions that would fry most electronics. Their absence was already being felt. The third accident struck the station's pride and joy. Its automated security network. Passwords began changing randomly. Authorization codes expired hours before schedule. Cargo manifests rearranged themselves in ways that would take weeks to sort out. "How is this happening?" Vex demanded of his security chief. "Where are your systems?" "Working perfectly, according to every diagnostic," the chief replied, his tentacles writhing in frustration. "But somehow nothing does what it's supposed to do." In the shadows of the maintenance tunnels, Merg Splash's amphibian cousins continued their quiet work. Their natural ability to interface with both organic and electronic systems had made them invaluable network technicians. Now their skills served a different purpose. Ashley's comlink buzzed. James's hologram appeared, trying to hide his grin. "Captain, you should see the reports coming in. Similar technical difficulties are hitting every major hub in Council space." "Really?" Ashley feigned surprise. "How unfortunate. Have they asked for our help?" "Oh yes. The Exerxian Trade Federation is offering triple our old rates to resume operations." James checked his data. "They're especially desperate about those medical supplies to Rigel. Seems their automated ships keep breaking down in the radiation belt." Ashley watched another loading mech fail to lift the silk shipment. "Tell them we're still processing our safety compliance forms. We wouldn't want to violate any regulations." Across the station, more systems began to malfunction. Gravity plates needed recalibration only Kravox strength could provide. Radiation leaks required lithoid expertise to contain. Computer systems developed glitches that only amphibian technicians could navigate. "This is sabotage," Vex shouted to his emergency council. "They're attacking our infrastructure." "With all due respect, Counselor," his chief inspector replied, "we can't find any evidence of tampering. Everything just stopped working right when the Deathworlders left." Ashley finally looked up from her datapad, meeting Vex's furious gaze. "Fascinating how that works, isn't it? Almost like your perfect society needs us dangerous primitives after all." She turned to leave, pausing at the door. "Oh, and Counselor, those medical supplies for Rigel. The clock's still ticking, but I'm sure your automated ships will figure out the radiation problem eventually. After all, That's why you got rid of us Deathworlders, right? Because you don't need us." The station's lights flickered, as if emphasizing her point. In the distance, another loading mech crashed to the deck. The tremors were only beginning. The annual Trade Federation broadcast was the galaxy's most watched event, a celebration of economic prosperity and technological achievement. High Counselor Vex stood at his podium, scales gleaming under the spotlights, preparing to address trillions of viewers across council space. "My fellow citizens of the galactic community." The feed suddenly fractured, splitting into thousands of parallel broadcasts. On every screen, on every planet, on every station, Ashley Morrison's face appeared. She sat at her captain's desk, the Morrison family crest visible behind her, her expression calm but resolute. "Good evening, Galaxy." Her voice carried the weight of generations of human determination. "I apologize for the interruption, but the time for pleasant fiction is over." In the council chambers, technicians scrambled frantically. "We can't stop it," one shouted. "The signal's coming from everywhere." "My name is Captain Ashley Morrison," she continued, "and I speak for the Deathworlder Alliance. For too long, we've watched our rights erode under the guise of safety regulations. Today, that ends." Holographic displays materialized around her, showing documented evidence of systematic discrimination. Trade restrictions, banned permits, fabricated safety concerns. Each record was damning, each revelation more shocking than the last. "But we're not here to fight." Ashley's voice remained steady. "We're not here for violence or revenge. Instead, we're going to give you exactly what you want: a galaxy without Deathworlders." The displays shifted, showing critical infrastructure across council space: heavy cargo ports, radiation-heavy sectors, deep space construction sites, all places where Deathworlder species worked the jobs no others could handle. In 1 week, every Deathworlder in council space will stop working. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "No sabotage, no attacks. We'll simply step back. Let you experience life without the species you're so determined to push away." In the council chambers, Vex's scales had turned pale. "She's bluffing. They wouldn't dare." "The Kravoks will stop mining your heavy elements," Ashley continued. "The Lithoids will stop maintaining your reactor cores. The Murg will abandon your computer networks. And yes, human ships will stop flying those dangerous routes that your automated systems can't handle." The evidence continued to scroll. Critical systems that relied entirely on Deathworlder capabilities, medical supplies that could only be transported through radiation zones by human pilots, construction projects that required Kravok's strength, power systems that only Lithoids could safely maintain. "You've built your civilization on our backs, while treating us like monsters." Ashley's voice carried centuries of frustrated dignity. "Now you get to see what happens when the monsters take a break." In orbit around Jupiter, Crooksval watched the broadcast with grim satisfaction. On Europa's radiation-swept surface, Silicon 7's crystalline form pulsed with approval. In the deep maintenance tunnels of Nova Station, Murg Splash and her people nodded in unity. To the Council, "You have 1 week to repeal the Sentient Safety Act and begin meaningful negotiations for equal rights." Ashley's expression softened slightly. To everyone else, "We're sorry for the disruption that's coming. We've tried every other way to be heard." The broadcast split again, showing the faces of Deathworlder species across the galaxy. Humans, Kravoks, Lithoids, Murg, all united in peaceful resistance. "You wanted a galaxy without Deathworlders." Ashley stood, her uniform crisp, her bearing proud. "Congratulations. In 7 days, you'll have exactly that. Choose carefully what happens next." The transmission cut off, leaving stunned silence across council space. In the chambers, Vex stared at his blank podium, realizing too late that the carefully constructed facade of superiority was about to come crashing down. On her ship, Ashley Morrison looked out at the stars. touching her grandfather's old captain's bars. Computer, begin countdown. 7 days to total shutdown. Across the galaxy, Deathworlders began their preparations, not for war, not for violence, but for the greatest display of passive resistance the Council had ever seen. The storm was about to break, and nothing in their regulations could stop it. The first signs of collapse came exactly 7 days after Ashley's broadcast. On the heavy mining world of Nexus Prime, Kreutzwald stood with his fellow Kravoks as the midnight shift change approached. One by one, they set down their reinforced mining equipment and walked away from the massive excavators. But you can't leave. The extraction site manager's scales flickered in panic. These mineral shipments are critical for the core worlds. Kreutzwald simply shrugged his massive shoulders. Then perhaps you should have thought of that before declaring us too dangerous to work in civilized areas. Across the system, similar scenes played out. The massive cargo ports, used to having Kravoks workers handle loads that would crush most species, ground to a halt. Automated loading systems sparked and failed under weights they were never designed to bear. On Europa's radiation-swept surface, Silicon 7 led the synchronized departure of every lithoid engineer from the system's primary fusion complex. Their crystalline bodies glowed with absorbed radiation as they filed out of the reactor cores. The containment systems need constant maintenance. The facility director called after them. No other species can handle the radiation levels. A design flaw you may wish to consider, Silicon 7 replied calmly, along with your policy of restricting lithoid movement in station communities. In the sprawling computer core of Nova Station, Murgsplash watched her amphibian technicians disconnect from the neural interfaces one by one. The station's quantum networks, accustomed to the unique biological digital synchronization only the Murg could provide, began to sputter and lag. The backup systems will handle it, a council technician insisted, his confidence fading as warning lights began to flash across his displays. For about 6 hours, Murgsplash noted, then the quantum degradation will begin, but I'm sure your safety regulations accounted for that. Ashley Morrison stood on her ship's bridge, watching the chaos unfold across multiple systems. Emergency broadcasts cluttered the channels as station after station reported critical systems failing without Deathworlder maintenance crews. Captain, James called from his station, the Rigel medical convoy is ready for launch. Their automated ships are still stuck in the radiation belt. They're begging us to resume service. Tell them we're still processing our safety compliance forms. Ashley's voice was firm but tinged with sadness. Remind them that according to their own regulations, we're too dangerous to trust with such sensitive cargo. The reports continued to flood in. Gravitational stabilizers failing without human engineers to maintain them in high-stress conditions. Deep space construction projects freezing without Kravok's strength to handle the massive components. Power grids fluctuating as lithoid radiation management systems went offline. In the council chambers, High Counselor Vex watched his perfect system crumble. Send in the military. Force them back to work. With what ships? His admiral replied wearily. Half our fleet captains are human. They've all filed simultaneous leave requests, citing stress from systemic discrimination. Perfectly legal under our own labor laws. A junior counselor burst into the chamber, scales nearly white with panic. The quantum communications network is failing. Without the Murg technicians, we're losing connection to the outer systems. Outside the council windows, Nova Station's artificial gravity stuttered. In the distance, a massive cargo freighter hung motionless, its automated systems unable to compensate for the load weights that Kravok's workers once handled with ease. They're not doing anything illegal, the Admiral continued. They're just stopping. And everything we built on their capabilities is stopping with them. Ashley's voice echoed in Vex's memory. You wanted a galaxy without Deathworlders. Congratulations. As if to punctuate the thought, the chamber's lights flickered and died, leaving only the emergency system's dim glow. In the shadows, reality began to sink in. The civilization that had dismissed Deathworlders as dangerous primitives was about to learn just how much it had come to depend on their unique strengths. 3 days into the strike, the Xerxian luxury liner Star Dreamer drifted helplessly at the edge of the Rigel radiation belt. Its automated navigation systems had failed spectacularly when attempting to plot a course through the radioactive maze that human pilots traverse daily. Another rescue beacon, Captain James reported from the Morrison Interstellar Command Center. Their ships hung back, watching the growing graveyard of stranded vessels. 400 passengers this time. The ship's life support is starting to fail. Ashley studied the distress call. Same response as the others. We're still awaiting safety certification under the new regulations. Remind them that their own laws classify us as too dangerous to approach passenger vessels. The Rigel radiation belt had become a symbol of the crisis. Dozens of automated ships clustered at its edges, their sophisticated AI unable to replicate the intuition and resilience that made human pilots essential for these routes. The medical supplies for the plague-stricken colonies remained undelivered. On Nova Station, the situation had deteriorated further. Silicon 7 stood in the observation deck, her crystalline form refracting the emergency lighting, as she watched chaos unfold in the main concourse. The primary reactor core is approaching critical instability, a station engineer reported to his superiors. The automated systems can't handle the radiation buildup without lithoid maintenance crews. What about the backup systems? High Counselor Vex demanded. They failed 6 hours ago, the engineer replied. We're running on emergency power, and that's fading fast. In the deep maintenance tunnels, Merg Splash monitored the cascade of system failures through her species' unique biodigital interface. The quantum network, deprived of amphibian synchronization, was unraveling. Station after station reported total communications blackouts. The Trade Federation's central banking system is offline, James updated Ashley. Without the Merg's neural interface skills, their entire financial network is collapsing. The crisis peaked at the Centauri Heavy Industries Complex, a massive construction project designed to build the next generation of council ships, sat abandoned. The automated construction units, rated for standard gravity conditions, couldn't lift the heavy hull plates that Kravok's workers once positioned with ease. Krixval received the report with grim satisfaction. They built their dreams on our strength, then called us primitive for having it. Even the Council's desperate attempts at adaptation were failing. They had tried deploying new automated systems, only to watch them burn out under conditions that Deathworlder species handled routinely. Every solution they attempted only highlighted how deeply they had relied on the very species they had marginalized. The outer colonies are going dark, a council member reported, his scales pale with stress. Without human pilots, we can't reach any system beyond the radiation belts. The supply lines are dead. In her ship's office, Ashley reviewed the mounting crisis reports. The galaxy's carefully ordered civilization was unraveling, not with a bang, but with the quiet absence of those who had kept it running. The council's holding an emergency session, James informed her. Looks like reality is finally sinking in. About time, Ashley murmured, watching another automated ship fail to navigate the radiation belt. How many lives would have been saved if they'd acknowledged this 3 days ago? The station's lights flickered again, and Ashley thought about the Rigel colonies waiting for their medical supplies. The Deathworlders' point was being made, but the cost was mounting. Yet every attempt by the Council to circumvent them only proved their value more dramatically. Captain, James's voice was quiet. The death toll on Rigel just passed 10,000. Ashley closed her eyes, feeling the weight of their protest. They had chosen nonviolence, but inaction carried its own price. The question was, how many more would have to die before the Council admitted what their civilization truly was, a partnership between all species, where even the ones they feared were essential. Send one final message to the Council, she ordered. Tell them the clock is ticking, and this time Their technology can't save them. Only cooperation can. Outside her window, Nova Station's lights continued to dim, a visible reminder that the galaxy's bright future had always depended on those it had pushed into the shadows. The council chamber's emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across faces both alien and human as Ashley Morrison stood before the assembled representatives. 5 days of cascading failures had forced this unprecedented session, though some councilors still clung to their prejudices. This is nothing short of extortion. High Councilor Vex's scales flickered between panic and rage. The chamber's failing environmental systems made his species particularly uncomfortable. "No," Ashley replied calmly. "This is a demonstration. Extortion implies we're demanding something unreasonable. We're simply asking for equal rights in the society we help maintain." Behind her, Crooksval's massive form loomed in the darkness, while Silicon 7's crystalline body provided more illumination than the failing power systems. Murgsplash perched on a support beam, her amphibian form barely visible in the shadows. "The death toll on Rigel has reached 50,000, a human medical officer reported. The automated ships are still unable to navigate the radiation belt. Without human pilots, the medical supplies." "Then save them," Vex interrupted. "You claim to be civilized, yet you let them die," says the one who wrote acceptable casualties in his trade regulations, Crooksval rumbled. The massive Kravox pulled up a holographic display of the leaked documents. "How many deaths were acceptable when you planned this?" The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs as the evidence of the Trade Federation's conspiracy played out. Calculations of expected casualties, dismissed as necessary losses in the pursuit of economic control. "The reactor core will reach critical failure in 6 hours, Silicon 7 announced, her crystalline form pulsing with absorbed radiation. "Without lithoid maintenance, the entire station will go dark. The backup systems are already beyond recovery." "What do you want?" a junior counselor asked, his scales pale with fear. "Name your terms." Ashley stepped forward, her voice carrying the weight of every Deathworlder's struggle. "Full economic rights, representation on the council, and the immediate repeal of the Sentient Safety Act." "Impossible," Vex sputtered. "The regulations are for everyone's protection." "Are they?" Murgsplash's voice echoed from above. The amphibian technician projected a series of system failures across the chamber walls. "Your protection has brought the galaxy to its knees. Your safety regulations have caused more deaths than any Deathworlder accident in history." The chamber's lights flickered again, emphasizing her point. In the distance, warning sirens wailed as another system failed. "We don't need your permission to be equal," Ashley continued. "We're proving that right now. What we want is your understanding, your acceptance that the galaxy works better when all species contribute their strengths instead of being feared for them." A newcomer stepped into the chamber, Junior Counselor Zix, her scales showing the soft blue of revelation. "She's right. Look at what we've built together. Our technology combined with their natural abilities. We're not losing control. We're gaining partners." "Partners?" Vex's voice dripped with scorn. "They're dangerous." "Yes, we are," Ashley agreed. "We're dangerous enough to keep your ships flying through radiation storms, strong enough to build your stations, resilient enough to maintain your reactors. The question is, are we going to be partners in this society, or should we remain the shadows you depend on but refuse to acknowledge?" The chamber's emergency lighting shows that moment to fail completely. Only Silicon 7's crystalline glow provided illumination, a stark reminder of how much they relied on Deathworlder capabilities. "The vote is called," the chamber speaker announced in the darkness. The motion: full repeal of the Sentient Safety Act, implementation of the Species Equality Initiative, and immediate Deathworlder representation on all council levels. In the darkness, priorities became clear. The choice between pride and survival was no choice at all. "The motion passes," the speaker announced moments later. by overwhelming majority. Ashley nodded in the crystalline light. Then let's save some lives. James, tell the medical fleet to launch. The people of Rigel have waited long enough. As if in response, the chamber's main lighting flickered back to life. In the restored brightness, former adversaries looked at each other with new understanding. The galaxy was about to change, not through violence or force, but through the simple power of showing the truth. 1 year later, the Galactic Trade Academy's lecture hall hummed with activity as students from across known space gathered for their mandatory course, Symbiotic Species Relations, Building a Stronger Galaxy Together. Young Xerxian scholar Zix Leto watched in fascination as her professor, a human lithoid teaching pair, demonstrated the principles of cooperative engineering. Notice how the radiation shielding combines human innovative design with lithoid crystal properties, Professor Sarah Chen explained, while her crystalline colleague, Teaching 7, absorbed a burst of radiation to show the effect. This is what we can achieve when we work together. The front row held an unprecedented mix of species. Xerxian trade students beside burly Kravox engineering apprentices, delicate Centaurians sharing notes with amphibian Murd data analysts. The old barriers had fallen, replaced by a growing appreciation for different evolutionary advantages. In orbit above, Nova Station had been transformed. The newly established Council Chamber of Cooperative Development occupied the same space where High Counselor Vex had once dismissed Deathworlder concerns. Now, Ashley Morrison sat at the lead chair, overseeing the integration of various species capabilities into galactic infrastructure. The Rigel medical route reports another successful quarter, James announced during the morning briefing. 0 casualties, 0 ships lost. The human Murg navigation system is performing beyond expectations. Ashley nodded, studying the holographic display showing trade routes once considered too dangerous for regular traffic. Human pilots worked in tandem with Murg neural interfaces, creating safe passages through the deadliest radiation belts. The new heavy industry complex is ahead of schedule. Kirksval added from his position as Chief of Construction Operations. Turns out combining Kravok's strength with Xerxian precision engineering makes everything more efficient. In the station's central core, Silicon 7 supervised a mixed team of lithoid and non-Deathworlder engineers. The reactor systems, once dependent solely on lithoid maintenance, now incorporated crystalline technology that made them safer for all species to operate. Radiation levels are stable, she reported. The new hybrid shielding is performing perfectly. Even the most sensitive species can now work safely in previously restricted areas. The changes weren't just technological. In the station's bustling marketplace, a Xerxian child fearlessly approached a massive Kravox vendor, asking questions about the heavy mining equipment on display. The vendor gently demonstrated how their natural strength could be channeled through precision tools, creating opportunities rather than threats. Remember when they thought we were too dangerous to run shops here? Murg Splash asked, her amphibian form comfortable in the new multi-environment public spaces. Now they're learning that different doesn't mean dangerous. The final symbol of change came during the graduation ceremony at the Trade Academy. Zix Lita stood to deliver her valedictorian speech, her scales shimmering with pride. A year ago, we thought safety meant separation, she began, addressing the mixed crowd. We built walls between species, calling it protection. But true safety comes from understanding, from recognizing that every evolution, every adaptation, every difference makes us stronger together. In the audience, Ashley sat beside the reformed High Counselor Vex, both wearing the new insignia of the Cooperative Council. The fear in his scales had been replaced by understanding, the prejudice transformed by a year of evidence that cooperation trumped control. To my fellow graduates, Zix Lita continued, we are the first class to learn not just trade routes and regulations, but the true strength of galactic society. Every species has its gifts. The human's resilience, the Kravox's strength, the lithoid's stability, the Murg's adaptability. These aren't threats to fear. They're resources to celebrate. As if underlining her point, a massive construction ship passed by the Academy's windows, its human pilot working in perfect sync with Kravok's loading crews and lithoid radiation specialists. The new generation watched not in fear, but in appreciation of how different capabilities combine to achieve the impossible. "We are all Deathworlders," Zix Lita concluded, using the term that had once been a slur but was now a point of pride. Because every species faced its own deaths to evolve, and only by embracing those differences can we truly live. The applause that followed came from hands, paws, tentacles, and crystalline appendages, a symphony of diversity that proved the galaxy had finally learned its lesson. The day the Deathworlders said enough had become the day the galaxy grew up.